recently I got a question from Joe in the Chewjitsu Facebook group, and a lot of times in the Facebook group I simply, type out the answer to the question. But in this situation, it's something that a lot of you guys are going to find yourself at some point. So I wanted to do a video on it so I can, share it with as many people as possible. So Joe's situation is that he was at a tournament recently and some of his teammates were competing and there were no other coaches around. And so therefore he became the coach for a little bit. And so he simply wanted to see if I had any tips on, being a new coach, or at least some tips on maybe something that could help him if he finds himself in that coaching spot again. So Joe, thanks for the question, brother. So the story to kind of illustrate some really important details, I think, is back in 2008, I had an MMA fight. And during this fight, I had two coaches over on the side. Now, at this event, I was really, really stressed out. I was so stressed out beforehand that the doctors came up and brought me and my opponent. Apparently, he was stressed out too. They brought us back and they said, "Hey guys, do you guys have any blood pressure issues?" And we were both kind of like, "What are you talking about?" And we asked them why, and they said both of our blood pressure was like 180 over 120, right? It was really high. I guess we were like about to have a heart attack or something. And I think this stemmed from the fact that we both had trained with each other at one point, and now we were getting ready to fight one another. And we both it was a good, when we trained together once, it was a really good scrap. And so, we thought we were going to be in for a battle. And so we were probably nervous. But afterwards, I think right before the fight, we settled down to a normal blood pressure range. And so we ended up fighting. Well, during this fight, I knew he could hit really hard, so I stayed away from him. I didn't want to engage with the punches, so I did some leg kicks. And he actually hit me with a really good shot that started the cauliflower ear here on my right ear. And I eventually took him down. Now, this is where the coaching part comes in. I took him down, and when I took this guy down, this guy is a freak, right? So strong, right? He's just muscles on top of muscles. And so I was trying to flatten him out, and he's turning on his side, and he's coming up. And I had these two coaches. Both of these coaches I had fought under before. I've trained with them. I was tuned into their voice. And one coach was yelling a bunch of stuff, and I really couldn't quite discern what he was saying, right? I was just like, I didn't hear it. And I remember, to remind you, this is happening in like a 2-second spurt, right? This little engagement. But it's crazy how it works, because in these 2 seconds, it feels like an eternity, but at the same time, everything just sort of flies by. That's kind of like the weird sort of dichotomy of competitions, right? Time seems to slow down, but at the same time, it goes really fast. So one coach is yelling, I can't understand what he's saying, and then my other coach, Colin, just goes, "Chewy, crossface. Chewy, crossface." He says it twice. And then I hear it, crossface, crossface. I crossface the guy, flatten him out, I get him out, I do a couple punches, and that's the end of the fight. I win, right? Nice, quick, clean victory. And again, I don't know what would have happened had I not crossfaced him. So it was a very simple direction. Now, the reason I bring that up is because I used to be a yeller. I'd yell stuff, and I used to not be as simple with my instructions prior to this match. And again, I was an assistant coach at this point. So at this point, afterwards, I became very focused on making sure that when I coached, I speak directly at the person, right? I don't yell. I try to speak very boldly, and it's almost like throwing your voice. Have you ever had a situation where when you're trying to get someone's attention, you don't know their name or something, you can speak, and you might have people around them, but somehow you can throw your voice at that one person, and they turn around because they know you're talking to them, right? That kind of thing. So you're throwing your voice at the person, and a lot of times I will say their name before the command, right? So let's say I'm saying, "Hey, outside hook." That's a cue that we use at the gym for something in our half guard. So I might say, "John, outside hook. John, get the outside hook." I'll say it twice, and I'll say their name with it. So I can, John, ears perk up, right? I hear my name, right? Imagine how when you go out anywhere, if someone says your name, you instantly perk up, right? I'll be in a restaurant, I'll hear someone say the word Chewy, and they're talking about their food's Chewy, but I'll hear Chewy, and I'm like, I perk up, right? So outside hook. And then from there, to get the command. Now, in that sense, one, I'm speaking to them directly. Also, I'm keeping it simple, and I'm using language that we use in the gym. When you're coaching in the gym, it's a time to teach. When you're coaching in a tournament or competition situation, because of the stresses involved, you simply cannot teach anything new. You might be able to give some tips in between matches, but you're not going to be able to teach. Your job as a coach at that point is simply to remind people. So in your case, Joe, you can simply go back to whatever the normal verbiage that you guys use for moves. And guys, this is one of the things as a coach, it's really important to have at least some terminology that you guys are familiar with, some sort of language that you have in your gym that you can remind each other of when you're competing. So in that situation, outside hook, that's what we use for our half guard. And so you might have some stuff like that for yourself. So again, we have speaking loudly, but not yelling. And then at the same time, we have speaking with very simple directions. Very simple. Crossface. I knew what that meant. There was no question. It wasn't like, "Hey, Chewy, he's coming up to his side. Make sure that you flatten him out with your forearm." No, it was like crossface. I know what that means. Now, moving on, another really good tip is to help out the person with the strategic element of what's going on. So a lot of times a person can get wrapped up in the match and they can be unaware of the time. Like I said, timing is a weird sort of thing in a competition anyway. And they can also be unaware of where they are with points. So as a coach, you have sort of the vantage point of being able to sit back, look at the time, look at the points, and then you can tell it to them to keep them where they are, right? So you can say, hey, John, you've got about 2 minutes left and you're up 4. Don't do anything stupid, right? Play smart. Or, you know, John, you're down 4 points and you got 2 minutes left. We got to do something. And that's come in handy for me plenty of times, because I know that there's been several matches as a black belt that I had, you know, even recently, where I was in the hole, I was in a point deficit, and then, you know, my teammates or my coach would tell me, hey, Chewy, you're down 6 and you got 2 minutes left, right? And for me, I'm like, oh crap. So I've got to go for broke. At this point, I'm going to use whatever reserves of energy that I have left to go for it, right? Because I got to make up those points. I got to do something. I've won several matches because of that, because someone said, hey, Chewy, you're down 2, let's go. And I would you know, drum up the energy, and I would come back and get a come from behind victory. I've won several like that. And so again, letting the person know where they are, those very important. So along the way, I'll constantly let my students know, hey, this is where you're at, this is where you're at, this is how many points you have, this is the time, over and over again, so they can kind of have an idea of where everything is. Another thing, another cue that's worth noting is telling people to breathe, right? It seems silly, but I've done this since I was a white belt, because when I was a white belt, one of the first matches I remember having is where I got into this person's guard and I was just like holding. And I remember almost having tunnel vision, like just brain farting, not sure what to do. And then my coach said, Chewy, breathe. And I took the breath that he had sort of drilled into me to take, which is a took my breath, and it was like everything opened up. I was able to relax, posture up, and then work from there. And I always maintain that cue, even for myself internally. So even if I don't have a coach, when I get to a position that's slowed down, maybe a dominant position, or maybe it's a position where, you know, maybe they even pass my guard, but we're kind of locked up, I will take my breath and try to relax and try to bring myself down a little bit so I can think more effectively. And the last little thing that I'll leave you with, Joe, is that when you're coaching, consider it more suggestive than an absolute, right? So what I mean by this is, when you're watching a match, you can see certain things sometimes that the person can't see, right? With your vantage point, but you can't see what they feel, right? So a lot of times there's going to be situations where you don't know everything that's going on because you can't feel it, right? You can see what's going on, and sometimes that's even hard because you might be missing something, right? They might be in a weird direction, but you can't feel what's going on. So throw those commands out there, throw those things, let them know what's going on. And if you see something, hey, outside hook, hey, like get the underhook, whatever it is, let them know. But ultimately, they have to kind of do it themselves. And sometimes they may not feel comfortable doing it because of something that's going on that you're not aware of. A good example of this is this weekend, one of the guys was competing, and I was telling him to use his right hand to do something, but I could not see that his right hand was being disabled by this opponent with the grip. And so I said it, and you know, I said it a couple times. He didn't respond to it, so I let it go. And afterwards, he said, man, I heard you with the right hand. I just couldn't. He had a good grip on my wrist, so I couldn't break it yet. I was like, oh, you know, fair enough. I understand, right? So again, it's always a suggestion more so than an absolute command. The only exception to that is sometimes I will not yell, but I will speak in a very like urgent, like, we got to go, you got to do this, right? That kind of thing. And that's when I basically am you know, calling you absolutely have to do this. So Joe, a couple things in there, a couple tips. I hope those are helpful to you, brother. Again, just remember that when you're out there as a coach in that situation, your job is never to teach. It's simply to remind those people of all the stuff that you guys have already done, and then just help them to kind of get them through and let them be aware of all the strategic elements that are going on. So thanks for the question, brother. I'll talk to you guys next time.